Well, my name is Rich Miller, and I'm with Visible Technologies. Welcome to our webcast today. Hope everybody's having a great day. The first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about our agenda. What we'll do is we'll start with some benchmark statistics from Gleanster Research. I'll do my introductions in just a second here, but we are going to start with some of the benchmarks from Gleanster Research. We'll move into some of the best practices. What do some of the top performers do with social media data around product launches? And then we're going to get real detailed into the types of things that you can actually address within a launch. Launches are very broad. They touch every element of marketing, and social media analytics can help every one of those, but we are going to get deeper into it. And then we're going to close up with some case studies. These are always very, very interesting because they make it tangible for you. We'll be calling out about 5 or 6 different case studies that hopefully are valuable for you. So what I want to do is introduce our presenters real quickly. Ian Michaels is the Principal Managing Director and also the CEO of Gleanster Research. Gleanster is a company that works with enterprises on strategic technology issues, customer engagement issues, and social media analytics has become a real strong point for their practice. Prior to joining Gleanster, Ian had held different leadership roles with a number of different analyst firms. He's worked with companies like Nike, Adobe, Sears, T. Rowe Price. We're really lucky to have him today because he has a ton of perspective on not only social media data, but also the business side of marketing. And then we also have Becca Ramble today from Visible Technologies, and she's the director of our account management team. And our account managers are the people that work with our clients every single day to help them get more out of their social media data and out of their social media analytic processes. Becca's been with Visible for about 6 years, so a ton of experience in working with clients in this area. She herself has worked with clients around product launches with companies like Scott's Fertilizer, FedEx, Xerox, and also has worked with companies like American Express and large agencies like WPP, Omnicom, Havas. So without any further ado, what I'm going to do is turn it over to our first speaker. That's Ian. And he's going to start us off with a little poll. Ian, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rich. So get your mouses, get your fingers ready here. We're going to start off with a really quick poll, and we're actually going to do another poll about midway through the presentation. And I think it's a really great way for you to kind of see where are your competitors at, where is the industry at with respect to the use of social media in the product launch. But I think this is a really great presentation because it's a very unique perspective around different applications of social. And we tend to see a lot of focus on social listening, on brand monitoring, but there are so many different ways you can use social data. So go ahead and click right on your screen right now. The question is, are you using social media monitoring tools today? We just want to ground the presentation and understand where you guys are at. Answer choices: yes for more than 3 years, 1 to 3 years, less than a year, no but we're planning to, and no but we have no plans to. So go ahead and answer, and then as we roll those in, let's push the, so I'm going to close the poll. And okay, so most of you using social listening tools, that's awesome because today's presentation is really tailored at how do you elevate what you're doing today and what you're most likely doing based on the data that we're seeing. How do you accelerate kind of your strategic applications of social and social listening and social data internally. All right. So before we begin, we always talk about in our data, we talk about top performing organizations. And just to ground this so you understand what that means for Gleanster, we do survey-based research. So every year we're conducting 30 to 50 surveys. I have a couple of surveys that I'm going to share, or data from a couple of surveys I'm going to share today. One is our 2013. Both of these at the end of 2013 were conducted at the end of 13. Social relationship management and social listening. So kind of on the social marketing side of things, one of the surveys captured different trends there, and the other one was really more about social monitoring and social listening. So 400 plus respondents to these surveys, and we have an algorithm or methodology that we put in place to identify companies that were achieving superior performance. In most cases, that's defined by revenue growth or customer satisfaction or metrics that they're answering about their performance, and then we just cut the data to look at what they're doing differently. So as I go through this data, we're going to talk about top performers. That's how those organizations are defined. They are not unique to any specific industry. They are across all different company sizes. Of course, when you talk about social monitoring in this case, in this topic area that we cover, it tends to be more of a focus on mid to large because you see investments in these types of technologies in those areas. So let's start with some data. This is coming from our Social Relationship Management Survey. And I wanted to set the stage with what are some of the challenges that I know you are faced with today and our respondents to our surveys are faced with. And this is asking organizations what is the most challenging aspects of social listening. And first and foremost, what we'll see here, let me grab the highlight tool. 82%, so the number one challenge was generating actionable insights from the social data. So how do you actually translate what you're collecting and all this data and information that these systems are giving you into business strategies? That's number one challenge. And then the top two after that are really around data integration. How do we incorporate social data with other voice of the customer data? Maybe we have customer surveys or customer feedback. How do we link all this together and build out this picture? And I think for marketers, your biggest challenge is some of this you can't control, right? There's some of this that you've got to go drive the initiative internally, get IT involved to collect the data, build out unique customer identifiers, and blah, blah, blah. But what we want to understand is what can you do today as a marketer to start driving more value from social? And this is a really great way to kind of build out what we're going to talk about today, because when you talk about this number one challenge of insights, of generating insights, well, that has everything to do with a product launch and the different components that go into a product launch. And we're going to actually show you some strategies today that don't require you to wait for IT or for that initiative to pull all this data together. You can start using social today. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, we asked organizations, what are the most compelling reasons that you implemented social listening? Now, many of you are using social listening tools today, and so reasons to implement included improving customer service and satisfaction, improving the effectiveness of marketing, and improving customer loyalty. So those were the top three reasons. That's why organizations are investing in these types of initiatives around social listening. And what I see here is a lot of parallels to a product launch. Isn't that everything that you want to accomplish out of a product launch? And these are huge initiatives and investments for your organization. And so you want to build out products that are going to satisfy those customers, that are going to keep them loyal and build great relationships. And you want to do this in the context of an effective marketing plan. But having said that, there are still challenges. And this perception gap that we're going to talk about right now is something that has been captured by multiple industry firms. This study actually comes from IBM, and really what they did is they did a survey that looked at, from a consumer standpoint, why do consumers interact with companies on social sites? And number one and number two answer for consumers were, well, we tend to follow social sites for discount, or social brands. We tend to follow a brand for discounts, for purchases, reviews of products and rankings, and just general information. And when they ask the same question to the business user, those of us today, why do you think that consumers are following you? The purchase and discounts tend to be very, very low on the list. And why businesses think that people are interacting on social is to learn more about products, to gather information, to learn about opinions, etc. And so isn't this a real tangent into the product launch strategies and how we're approaching product launches today? It's very much a promotional activity, and we're using social as a vehicle for educating people about our products. But we can do more. And so our message today is to understand how do we take it to the next level, and how do we use social listening and social data to actually do more. So let's look at some of the different ways that you can actually use social in your day-to-day kind of grind as a marketer. I think when we talk about social, we tend to talk about this customer experience. And at Gleanster, we define that customer experience as any interaction a consumer or a prospect or a customer has with your brand across any channel. So it could be marketing, sales, or service. And we tend to myopically focus on social around this customer experience. And from a marketing standpoint, we've got promotion and segmentation and targeting and brand monitoring and reach and messaging. And then sales, well, we get some cross-selling and upselling through social, maybe some coupons to drive customer retention or customer acquisition. And then, of course, we've all heard the great use cases for years now from the use of social for support and service, monitoring sentiment, and you've got like Best Buy out there with the service and support on Twitter that they have, and that's come to be a best practice today. People are going to talk on these channels, so you have to have a vehicle for making sure that you manage what they say appropriately and follow through appropriately, because that's what creates great customer experiences. But I think there's more that we could be looking at, and one of the things that we're going to layer into this conversation today is the product development side of things, how you can use social to actually inform the creation of great products and what goes into those products. Use social to replace some of those cumbersome and expensive focus groups that you're doing, because this is your consumer and this is them in their environment, in their natural environment. There's no bias. And so it's a great way to kind of capture and layer into this doing more. Having said that, in the data, and I'll show you the data in a few slides here, but if I was to distill it down and you asked me, well, how are companies using social today, or social listening, there's really a handful of ways that are very, very common for organizations to leverage social. And that's primarily around promotion. We're getting the brand out there, we're tweeting, or we're creating content on Facebook and generating likes. Maybe we're doing some segmentation and we're targeting different consumers via social channels, and we're listening. We want to understand what they're saying about our brand, about our competitors' brands, but not much else. And so what I want to get at today are these gray boxes, and I hope you can see the text, but we're going to explore those in more detail, because these are the different ways that you could actually be using social to elevate that product launch around pricing, strategy, messaging, the focus groups, etc. But let's look at why that is. Why is it that we had so many gray boxes on that last slide, and we're not really taking it beyond the listening and the monitoring side of things? And I think a few of the most common reasons are just that lack of integration between the social data and the social channels. We've got all these different emerging social channels, and it seems like there's a new one every year. Now we've got Pinterest to worry about, and Instagram and all these different sites and things. But the big two, obviously Twitter and Facebook, and maybe LinkedIn if you're B2B. But just the integration of the different messaging across those channels is challenging enough. It's one thing to actually deliver a message. It's quite another to orchestrate a collective kind of consistent message across all the different channels that you operate in. And we talk about the multi-channel challenge and email and direct and your print, etc. But within the social realm, there's that challenge. So that makes it hard for us to kind of integrate and incorporate social effectively. The data itself, and this was seen in the top 3 challenges for top performers, the customer data and linking it to, we have these customer profiles, we have customer information. How do we actually link them to the Facebook and the user handles on Twitter that our customers are using? And so getting at that can be very difficult, and that's an integration challenge internally. And then just existing content. Do you have the right content? Do you have the right strategies internally and the expertise to leverage social effectively? Translating email content or a print brochure into tweetable information or things that are sexy and edgy and making consumers want to engage is not that easy, and it doesn't always just one-to-one translate. So it kind of creates this demand for resources internally that need that expertise. And that's the final one here, and what we're talking about, insights derived. Can you actually translate what you're getting out of social, what these tools are telling you about sentiment and reach and what consumers are saying? Can you translate that into actual strategy? And my argument today is that you absolutely can, and you can do it tomorrow. You don't have to wait for some of these other things that we saw up here to happen. You can actually translate some of what's happening in social tomorrow, and that's what those case studies will reinforce at the end of the presentation. So what can you do today to get more out of social listening? Well, let's start with some data. And this is some of what I was getting at in the beginning of the presentation. But how do we see social media used today? Let's benchmark the use of social media. And this is coming again from our social relationship management survey. This data is actually cut by brand marketers and with revenue of over 50 million. So we really wanted to look at organizations that and how do brand marketers tend to use social media internally. And so given the fact that 80% in this pie chart, 80% of our respondents said that social media was an active channel, wouldn't it be great to dive a little bit deeper and understand what that means in the context of this consumer? And so, of this organization. And so when you ask them, well, how are you actually using social, what we see from these brand marketers are really primarily two ways. It's brand awareness and social listening. Some of it is being used to drive sales growth. There might be some promotions and coupons and things happening. And then the fourth most common way is the product launch. But we see about 5 out of 10 marketers using social media for product launch. And that's where kind of the foundation of this presentation came in to be, because we want to understand what are they actually doing and what could you be doing if you're not using these technologies or social data effectively. So here's that last poll. Go ahead and participate right on the screen there. But the question here is, have you used social media in a new product launch internally? And so we're giving you multiple answer choices here because we know there are some cases where you had a product that you maybe did a better job than others using social, but we're just curious, on an ongoing basis, are you using it to promote the launch? And don't stretch here. Let's get at a really refined. If all you primarily do is promote, then just say that. You preparing for the launch? Are you influencing the product development? Are you targeting new audiences using social, et cetera? Okay, I'm going to close the poll results here. Phenomenal, exactly what we thought. So most of you using it to promote the launch. Some of you actually preparing for that launch using social and validating some of the messaging. So some of what we're going to talk about today will actually resonate. And then, and then down from there and no, but planning to. So this is awesome, 29%. This will be very helpful. So we actually asked those brand marketers, we actually followed through on the survey results. How do you use social media for a product? Have you used social media for a product launch? And 8 out of 10 said yes, just like we saw just now. I mean, I think that was consistent with the data that we just saw in the survey, which is, most of us, yeah, we may have used it for product, maybe not the best, we're not doing the best job. When you ask in what capacity, 89% saying, well, we use it for promotion, which is what we just saw, and then 97% using it for brand monitoring. I mean, we would expect to see that. If you're using social media and you have a globally or nationally known brand, you're going to be monitoring what's going on in that channel via some of these different tools. And so I think, as we look at, well, what are other applications of social listening? One of those huge investments, and as we saw, top 4, there's a lot of answer choices there. 5 out of 10 marketers were using it for a product launch. Well, let's dissect this product launch and what goes into that product launch. And there are really there's a really strategic impact on your organization and everything that goes into that product launch. You've got supply chain ramifications and R&D and service, et cetera, that all have to go into this. And so it matters if you get this right. And unfortunately, in the age of social, if you get it wrong, you run the risk of everything going viral or it blowing up in your face. And there are plenty of case studies that we aren't going to go into today of disasters on social. And so I'm sure that is top of mind for marketers is, oh my gosh, I don't want that to happen to me. So maybe that's one of the reasons we don't leverage it as heavily, because I'm a little bit nervous. Everything we'll discuss is around how you can really test and validate what you're doing so that you don't end up in a bad situation like that. So what goes into a typical product launch? And I've just distilled it down, and looking at the order right before I presented, I should have ordered this in a different order because I had to put planning first. And but just in general, there are so many different aspects of launching a product, and you have everything from validating pricing and figuring out what who are we targeting and at what price and what does that say about our product. From an audience targeting and messaging standpoint, what's going to actually resonate with this audience, Do we have to go after early adopters? Do we have to, kind of, is this a commodity? Is there a way we can position it? Focus groups are consistently a part of product and service launches, and they tend to be fairly costly. They're time-consuming to conduct, and they require additional resources to kind of distill the information that comes out of them. Typically have agencies involved, and there's very large spend with those agencies, so there's an impact there. The geography and the regions that you target in that product launch matter. Could be from a supply chain standpoint, but it also just generally could be from a messaging and positioning and where your target audience is. So understanding where you launch it is critical. And then just the general planning. So before we get into the case studies, the message that I want to ring true in your mind as a participant here is we've got to move from a reactive use of social listening, and that's primarily what's happening today. What happened when we launched this, and who said what when they read this message, and that was a great quote, we should promote it. These are reactive ways of leveraging social, and our message is, the most immediate ROI comes from a combination of reactive social listening and more proactive or strategic use of social. And so from a proactive standpoint, can we now use social to validate assumptions, to test hypotheses? We're not waiting for something to happen. We're actually going to conduct a test and then validate whether or not we thought this message actually resonated. Did it? Are people happy about that pricing? Are they talking about it, or are they upset that it's too high? So it's really more about using social listening as an analysis tool than just a listening and reactive tool. And so let's jump into some really great case studies, and I'm going to bring Becca into the conversation here. But what we're going to do is kind of go through some of the different elements of a product launch and give you some real-world tangible case studies that demonstrate how social can be used in these different areas. And really happy to have Becca here because she can kind of layer in Visible's experience with their customers and how they've leveraged social. And so to kick things off, let's talk about how we use social for market research. And I'm sure you're all familiar with during the Super Bowl, Lay's had that promotion where they were having users create their own potato chip flavors, and everyone was voting on social. And so there's some really great ways to start leveraging social to layer in how you develop those products to target your right audience. So Becca, I'm going to hand it over to you for this first case study on market research.
Thanks, Ian. So one of the things that I think we've all seen out when we go to the grocery store to the market is those fruit and vegetable juice blends are a great way to sneak vegetables in. A major beverage company was saying, we need to get into this market segment, but we really want to leverage what's out there and what we can learn about our potential customers so that we're going to market with the most effective product we can. So what they listen to is not only people talking about their own brand, but what if we listen to people talking about the segment in general, people talking about fruit and vegetable juice blends that they made themselves or that they got at the local market, and big competitors like the V8 Fusion. And what they're able to do is cross-validate that with learnings that they got from focus groups, so that what they were able to do is create not only a product, but a go-to-market campaign that really resonated because it took into consideration, here were our potential customers' pain points. Here's what they didn't like about what was out there. Here's what they really liked about it, so that they created a product and a marketing campaign that really hit the ground running. And I think that's one of the great ways that people can use social is say, not only what are they saying about us or even our competitors, but what are they saying about the segment in general? When you listen to what people are saying in a brand agnostic way, I think that's really where you can get a lot of learns for product development and your go-to-market strategy.
Awesome. Okay. So let's jump into this idea of pricing and using social media to impact a product launch from a pricing and a strategy perspective. And you can definitely use it to test pricing from a regional standpoint or to monitor how customers are reacting. Maybe it's a small population of users and you've launched the pricing or a pricing strategy within that smaller population to see how they react. But you can also monitor, and I don't just want to kind of say pricing can be something that's validated via social. It can also impact your strategies. And a great example of this is the airline industry. And where there was so much competition as gas prices rose for that ticket price. And as we all know, it's annoying, but they shaved off you now pay extra to check your bags and bring bags. Well, guess what? There were also possible opportunities to shave off other areas. And in the airline industry, they actually use social and customer feedback to understand some of those different areas. And one of those was food. Now, if you notice, you generally, unless you're in first class, you would pay for food separately. And then they found on using social media listening, they found that the sentiment around food wasn't great. It was generally pretty negative. So, if they cut that, they could, reduce the overhead and get ticket prices down. So interesting use cases, but, just not just from a validating the pricing strategy, but also from a what is that mix internally. All right, let's shift to new product launch. Becca, let's get this case study.
Sure. So we work with a large technology manufacturer, and what they were doing was they were going to go to market with what they considered to be a game changer. It was a new segment for them, and it was really going to be a new segment for the B2B market in general. And so for them, what they really wanted to do is layer their listening around the launch to not only start with a benchmark of what's the space now. So they looked at their brand volume. They looked at the number of people talking about the segment they were going into, so they could really create a very solid baseline to measure their success against. Then what they did was throughout the campaign, throughout the product launch, they did listening on a daily basis. They had auto-generated reports and dashboards that they could share internally because they were able to assess almost instantaneously the response and success of their launch, who was talking about it, which influencers were sharing information, so that they could start an engagement campaign almost immediately. They reached out to people, hey, we saw that you posted that. Let's get you a sample of what we're able to do. They were able to assess that against where people were talking about them versus their competitors, so they could inform their sales tools. Because again, this was B2B. They needed to be able to inform their salespeople who were going out to their clients. And really what we saw was that the ability to have that almost instantaneous feedback to the launch really helped the entire organization feel informed and support that from, again, the strategic drivers of the campaign and the launch all the way down to the support people and everybody who was on the ground meeting with clients, meeting with customers, and fielding their questions. They were able to inform their website strategy of, here's the stuff people are talking about online, let's put that on our website. All of these things really were empowered by the ability to get people's responses immediately. And I think that's really what we see so much about social, is it just gives you that near, instant feedback. And we've seen that a lot with clients who've got that same sort of thing for ad campaigns, new products. It's just, I can hear right now what people are saying, and that's an amazing, amazing thing.
Yep. All right. So this is a really great case study, actually, not just around social listening, but also big data. And I think we've actually published some research that suggests that most companies don't have a big data challenge. While in your mind you might think, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. In most cases, you can analyze what you have internally with tools that you likely have today. They can be BI tools or even in Excel. But this, from a targeting standpoint, let's talk about how do you use social to not just regionally target, but maybe to identify segments or to identify specific messaging that will resonate with your customers. And this example comes out of USA Today, did some major analysis around when customers interacted with their news online, so the news publications and some of the news articles. And they actually analyzed the Twitter, the tweets that their customers were making on social channels around travel, so getting on the plane, heading to blah, etc. And they figured out that there were key segments of individuals who frequently traveled and that they could stream based on the actual location or the destination of that travel. They could stream news and media that was specific to that area and increase engagement, increase loyalty, increase subscription rates, etc. They also did analysis to understand what time of day would be ideal to send those. It turns out in the East Coast they tend to get up a little earlier than folks in the West Coast. So just kind of using social to start to uncover. And the message here is you're creating hypotheses and you're testing and validating them. So you may think that based on what you're seeing in your customer base and based on the data that you've seen in the past, that this particular message will resonate or this particular target segment is ideal. Using social, you can actually validate that. And I think the other message is you have the tools to do it today. A lot of this can start to be uncovered with the social, visible social tools and things that are going to start to get at distilling some of the data that you're seeing from social down to some dashboards and screens where you can test some of this stuff. All right. Marketing optimization. Yeah.
This is one of my favorites, and we're starting to talk about, we hear more and more about, the impact of measuring, geographic responses to things. So we work with a lawn and garden product manufacturer, and they had come to us and they said, we know that the market in general needs, it was going to be a deer repellent product. We know that the market needs it, but we really want to understand, how are people feeling about it, because we really want to inform what our marketing messaging is going to be, because we really want to think about what is it that our customers are specifically asking for. So we got to partner with them, and we're really lucky to be able to partner with them to identify, where people were talking about issues with deer damaging their lawns and gardens. And what we were able to find is by geolocating the data and really looking at where these authors talking about deer damage were speaking, not only were we able to understand that there was regional differences in the way people were experiencing the deer problems, but we also helped identify markets for this company to product launch, sequentially. So they were able to launch in these specific markets and map specific retail locations for product distribution. And as a result, this manufacturer was able to partner with their retail locations to create end caps so that they were really featuring this new product prominently. And we got a lot of positive feedback. This product launch was very successful. They felt that they had the right product in the right locations at the right time. And I think this is one of those great examples that really taking it beyond just how do people feel about what we're going to give them and go into where do they need it, what are these specific groups asking for, you really then are able to maximize your resources and investment for a successful launch.
Yeah, and likewise, I think that how you talk to them in these different regions, you can start to uncover with social. So, the message itself, which is a nice segue into this, but like what goes on that end cap to get different people to resonate? Because of course, different climates, different concerns, different issues, and different animals. So, it's a great way to kind of not just know regionally, but also what do you actually say. And so this is a great use case from a listening and a messaging standpoint. I read this somewhere and I was looking very hard and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't spend more time trying to find the actual software, the name of the software. But this is a case where a software company, not a software company, it was an organization, .org, like a cancer organization that wanted to create an app on the Apple the App Store that helped smokers quit smoking. And so they sponsored this app and they created it, and it was like designed to help smokers be an outlet to say, how are you feeling today? Well, I feel terrible. I hate life, because I'm quitting. And they could kind of share and encourage each other with this app. It's a great idea. And so instead of using focus groups, they actually launched a campaign via social, and they tested their messaging in advance of launching this app. And it turned out that originally they used language that offended smokers, that it was too abrupt and too much. And so instead smokers said, well, you're not sensitive to how we're feeling at all, and we don't really want to talk about it in that way. That makes it worse for us. So they were able to actually adjust it in advance of the rollout, and to make sure that they didn't get this huge backlash, which would likely just entirely derail the product and the whole intent of the approach here. So, it's about really using social as a focus group. I mean, these are your consumers in the environment that they're comfortable in. There's no bias. They're not together in a room. You don't end up with that groupthink and some of the challenges. And so just the ability to carve out a segment and test what you're about to say to the broader audience is hugely valuable. It costs less. You gather those insights a lot faster. And you know, it just allows you to hone in on, and especially with some of the new tools capabilities around natural language processing and text analytics, where you can actually see how people talk about things. You know, it turns out they probably wouldn't say smoking app. They might say, you know, smoking software, or vice versa. You can start to understand how would they even talk about collecting and sharing this type of product. So really great use case there. And then from a promotional standpoint, you know, we all said we were doing it. You know, we're using social to promote new product launches primarily, or you're not using it at all. But if you're doing it, you're primarily using it for promotion. Those focus groups are really expensive. And so, you know, if you can get at a highly targeted real-time source of insight of buyers via social, well then that's your audience. Let them share and promote based on how they're interacting. And so the best use case, this is actually a very old use case. This is the Cisco ASR router. But Cisco of all, you know, you wouldn't think, oh my gosh, you know, Cisco is a hardware router. That's not relevant to me as a consumer, you know, unless you're really techie. But they actually launched this product via social only. And they had a long history of spending millions of dollars to promote products. They had a whole launch plan, obviously, around, you know, PR and direct mail and you know, emails, et cetera. And they decided, let's try this out. Let's do this via social only. We'll engage with our target audience, who are IT buyers. They got 90 times more attendees than traditional launches to different followings and webinars and things that they were doing, 40 million impressions in the first few months, and they had a list of 90 buzzwords to monitor after 1 month that they didn't even know existed, that they should be thinking about. And so what this really led up, you know, for them, it led into engaging influencers, to figuring out who cares about our products and who's talking about them. Let's talk with them, let's engage them, let's get them invested in our brand in a more strategic way, so that the next time we launch a product, these folks are on board with us and they're, you know, happy and talking to their different audiences. So, you know, a great way from a promotional standpoint, not just to say, hey, we're launching this product and here are the features, but to understand, you know, who's going to engage at what level, why are they going to engage with this product, why would they care if I, you know, promote it in this way, and a way to save time, cut costs, you know, build that interactive and real-time engagement, because that's what it's all about. It's about the relationship. And so you got to really, I think that the last thing I'll close on is, you have to stop thinking about social as a channel to tell people what you want them to know. I mean, we have to do that. You know, like let's not be naive here. That's part of marketing. We have to get out there. But you're really trying to tell people what you want them to know in a way that engages them, that makes them want to talk about what you're doing. So it does require a fundamental shift in how you deliver messages. You know, what's going to actually get them to engage? What's going to make them feel invested in my brand? Those are the types of questions that you want to be asking, not what do I want to tell them about my product. So I'll close with that. If you're interested and you just want, you know, something that reinforces everything we discussed today, complements of Visible Technologies, we've got a Gleanster deep dive research asset that is on this very topic. We talk about everything that we talked about on the webinar, and it's got some additional data and stats in there. So you'll get that from Visible after the presentation. You can also get that from the Visible website. And then there's some great resources on Gleanster.com. We've got a category on our research called Voice of the Customer, and so really great tools around how to invest in social listening tools, best practices from top performers, lots of great assets on the website there. So let's move into Q&A. And Rich, I'm going to let you, I haven't looked at the questions but by all means, folks, please put the questions on the chat, or I'm sorry, on the sidebar. Put them right in there, and then we'll start getting at them.
Great. Thank you very much, Ian and Becca. Yeah, we had some great questions come in. We won't be able to get to all of them. Some of them I'm actually going to follow up with an email around, because they're pretty specific, and I think I can get you some documentation that will give you some good answers. But the first question really kind of goes back to the food and beverage case study that you had, Becca. Somebody was asking if you could get into a little bit more detail about how social monitoring was used to identify perceived unmet needs of a product, in this case drinks, either to inform the enhancement or inform the marketing message that the product actually provided. So could you go a little bit more detail maybe into the process that we use to analyze data to get at that unmet need and then craft a message to push the value proposition?
Definitely, and that's a fantastic question. And we actually have a lot of clients that utilize, in the Visible tool we have a categories feature, and you can surface things thematically where you're looking at people who are expressing they wish a brand had that, or they wish a product did this or that. And in the case of the fruit and vegetable juice blend, what we looked at was people talking about the products in general and using taxonomy and using phrasing like, I wish it had this, I really don't like that it has that, if onlys, those sort of things that really indicate that the customers were looking for something additionally. And often it was the case that, they're hiding vegetables but it still tastes gross, or the color is the problem. That sort of thing, the off green and things like that, so that way they could come up with a color theme of the product, and they weren't so keen on hiding the vegetables as enhancing the fruit with the vegetables. So that is specifically for that. But again, a lot of our clients really look at mining conversations around the if-onlys, and I wish that, and I'd love to tell them they need to do this, because it really provides an insight into what your customers want to see you doing.
All right. Ian, do you have anything to add there?
Rich, yeah, no, I actually wanted to, I don't on this topic, but I want to answer one of the questions I see on here, and it's a really great question. I'm sure it's on everyone's mind, is around engagement on social. And so someone actually posted a question that said, look, what we see is that 99% of, social, our consumers are passive, and there's really 1% that's actually active. So are you getting a good sample if you're using social as a channel? Is that actually representative of, can it replace? And that's a fantastic question, and here's how I answer it in two different ways. So on the one hand, I don't think that any of us are sitting here today, and we tended to be more biased with the way we were presenting the information because the topic was social and product launch. It doesn't completely replace what you're doing. And and I think that we're still in a stage in the inception of social and kind of validating it as an emerging or marketing channel, where you have to test. And all of the case studies that we're seeing here today were huge risks for these brands. And it wasn't like, oh, this is the best practice, and if you do this, you get this result. Unfortunately, you don't have that kind of security. But I can't tell you another source of accessing consumers that is more widespread. And so the second part of this around is social, are we seeing, if 99% of our audience is passive, in that case, you may actually have to build an audience. I hate to say it, but that's your new strategy. And a great example of this is the forklift industry. Who would think, there's a manufacturer of forklifts, and they said, and I remember this case study from a presentation that I gave, and they raised their hands and said, well, look, we thought that nobody would talk about forklifts on social, right? I mean, if you drive a forklift, are you going to go on social and tweet about it? But it turned out that this manufacturer found this group of individuals, and it was a fairly large group that did a contest every year, and they did this forklift. It was a driving, I forget what it. They drive in and out of the cones, and they all got together, and they had fun, and they had a contest. They gave an award, and they were just forklift operators having fun. Well, the manufacturer went to them and said, hey, guys, we want to sponsor that, and we want to build a social channel for you. And it exploded into like a 30,000 people following on social. And you better believe that that's a great source of insights for that manufacturer and using social from a product launch standpoint. So, I mean, don't limit yourself to what's going on today. If it's not the most predominant channel, then maybe you need to think about how are different ways that we can build it out.
Right. Thanks a lot for that, Ian. I saw that question, and from our standpoint, in the B2C world, maybe there are, all other things being equal, larger communities. In the B2B world, all other things being equal, smaller communities like the forklift people that Ian was just talking about. But I think Ian made a great point, which is it's part of your tool set. Social media listening has to be part of your tool set nowadays. Think about how much time your typical brand marketer will put into setting up a focus group. Granted, you can go to amazing levels of depth with a focus group, but they're incredibly difficult to pull together and also incredibly expensive. And if you look at your social media listening program as a way to augment that in a real-time kind of way, which is what we're all moving toward, more real-time marketing, more personalization. Things are happening in a heartbeat. There's no time sometimes to pull focus groups together. Social media listening just has to be part of your tool set. But great point also there, Ian, about creating your own community and your own discussion. That's a great comment. So Becca, we had one other question that I think was a good segue off of the fruit juice market example that you were talking about, and then I've got one other question for you. But somebody had asked the question, how do we bring together attitudinal segments that come out of brand marketing and what is going on within social listening? So these attitudinal segments could be, people of a certain disposition that are within a particular demographic, that are customers of our competitors, and those are the people we're trying to really move the needle on. How do we use social media listening to really get at those people?
That's a really good question, and it's something we're getting the opportunity to work with our clients more and more on. So as we look at attitudinal or even demographic groups like stay-at-home moms or business travelers or people who are suffering from specific medical or psychological conditions, what we do is we create data collection around segmenting those people out by the things that they say. And we also, our analyst team has done a phenomenal job of creating ways to segment people by a collection of not only the content and the things that they say, but also the sites that they're on or that they tend to participate on. So we've done a lot of research among women at different stages in their lives. We did a study recently where we looked at women at different milestones in their lives, graduating from high school or college, first apartments, getting married, first jobs, so that these companies could then create marketing opportunities based on where their target audiences were in their lives. So really what we've done more and more is just gone deeper into how we surface that data through very creative search technology.
Great. Thank you.
Cool.
So a question here for both Becca and Ian. Somebody asked a real fundamental question just recently that I think is a great one that kind of level sets everybody. So how do we use social media analytics to help us understand how people are reacting to a very specific TV or radio spot? So maybe tell another example of how people are using it to get at specific messages coming through specific channels associated with a launch. I'll open it to both Becca and Ian to come up with another example there or any comments on that.
Ooh, yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of any really great example that I could fire out. I'm sure I could uncover one. But, I think it's really, when you're starting to test via different channels, then it becomes really important to use hashtags and things that can start to segment how the audience is reacting. So, just like when we look at mobile, you put those QR tags on the different display thing, and you look at engagement via those avenues. I think social is kind of that's you use some of the different vehicles that users would easily interact. I think that's the key, is making it super easy. If you create barriers or they have to register or anything, you're not going to be able to measure it. So, if you're looking at engagement across different channels, probably the best use cases are coming out of agencies where the whole campaign is designed to be an interactive engagement with the consumer, and contests and things of that nature. Levi's did a really cool contest. They put here's a great example actually. Levi's did a contest where the end users or the buyers of the jeans could create their own design. They were going to have a social contest online, and the winner of that design would actually have their jeans produced on a mass scale. And so they actually had spots on, I think, The Apprentice, on the television show The Apprentice. And they have a whole case study where they can measure engagement via that specific campaign that they ran, and the fact that they had elevated the brand from what was considered, in quotes with my fingers, mom jeans, where a lot of younger folks would not buy Levi's at the time. This was back in 2000 because they were mom jeans. And they created this new, fresh, new, hip, we're engaging on social. If you're young, you can submit, let's get us out of the mom jean type, perspective and messaging. And they worked. It worked phenomenally. And now they've got these great new kind of designer jeans that that was part of the reason that they even launched into that area, that they were able to make the step from an old brand for parents to kind of here's new engaging with younger audiences on social.
Great. Becca, any thoughts on the analytic process behind trying to get specific feedback on messages through specific channels?
Sure, and we can go back to TV and movies. So we actually have some clients where we're looking at the feedback to upcoming movie launches so that they can actually predict based on the volume of content and the associated sentiment of people talking about the movie, the actors, just sort of the buzz around the movie, that they can predict, that they're aiming to predict the opening weekend receipts and sort of the longevity of the movies, the movie success in the theaters. And a lot of this is sort of emerging science of analytics, but really what it comes down to is making sure that you're listening to the broadest set of data that's relevant to that campaign, that TV show, really whatever it is. And it's often beyond just the name of it. It can be a lot of different ways people talk about it. We did have a blog post that we did where one of our Visible team members actually did a prediction of the success of the fall TV lineup based on what she saw the way people talked about it in the weeks leading up to it. So we can include the link to that as sort of our follow-up materials. But it's quite amazing what people talk about and the way you can analyze and look at it.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, in the interest of time here, I think we're going to end the Q&A session. Thank you very much for the questions that came through the chat, and also thank you to Ian and Becca for their time answering some of those questions. So to wrap everything up here, I do want to tell you a little bit about Visible. We're Visible Technologies. We're a social media monitoring and analytics platform. We really differentiate ourselves in a couple of different ways. One is just at the platform, data that you can really trust. The depth of data is really tops in the industry, and being able to trust that data is really tops in the industry also. And then the other thing that Becca alluded to are industry experts. We have a number of consultants that work with Visible and work with our clients every day to get at the insights that you're trying to get at. We care about what you care about, right? And we really take that to heart and really, really pride ourselves on the ability to generate insights, both from the platform and then also working with our consultants. So in closing here, if you have any other questions that you'd like to get answered, the email addresses are there for our presenters, and also my email address is there. If you'd like to get a demo of Visible, you can go to www.visibletechnologies.com, and you'll see a requested demo link there on our homepage in the upper right-hand corner. Or you can send a message to info@visibletechnologies.com. You can follow us on Twitter. You can also follow us on Facebook. Ian alluded to the deep dive. We're going to be getting that out to everybody in just a couple of days. But by the end of the day today, what I will do is I will send this deck out to everybody in a PDF form. So please keep your eyes open for that. That is all for today. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope everybody has a great week. Take care.